interviewer. You're not what I expected. Well, I always expect a newspaper man to look bookish. You don't look bookish. In fact, you look rather distinguished, like a Goyish or Woody Allen. Welcome to my studio, to my refuge, to my world apart. You got here right on time. In fact, you're 5 minutes early. I hate people who come on time. I hate them more if they come 5 minutes early. It shows no individuality. It means you have an inferiority complex, but you're on an ego trip. You're a sheep in the flock that likes to stand out. You're a master of contradictions. I'll bet you're the polite kind that says please and thank you, but you don't mean it. Close the door behind you. You're letting the flies out. So, tell me, what is this interview for, Putz? Why do I call you Putz? I call you Putz because I don't know your name. No, I don't want to know your name. This is an interview. It's not a relationship. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Chalk it up to exhaustion. I'm very, very tired. I promise, I apologize, all right? I won't call you Putz. So, schmuck. What is the interview for, anyway? The New York Times. All the news that's fit to print. That's what we used to say about the great artist Goya. All the nudes that are fit to paint. Go ahead. See, you've had a humor bypass. Why am I exhausted? I just flew in from London this morning. I got jet lag. I came right here because I needed a fix. I needed to get some paint on my hands. London, God, that's going to be a beautiful city when it's finished. I was there doing the Muppet Show. Do you know Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog? They're the two greatest actors I have ever worked with. And if you get into an argument, you can always use them to wash your car. Now, take that stool. Move it over. More, right there. Sit. Now that's amazing. You look shorter when you're standing up. No, you sit down, you look rather tall, but then you stand up and you were shorter than you were sitting down. I've never seen anything like it. Loosen your tie. That's it. And move into the light. You see, it's all about the light, my dear friend. The shadow, highlight, it's what painting's all about. It's what life is all about. That jacket wouldn't look good in any light. Jesus. All right, now, in a little further, and turn to your left. Oh, but you're from the New York Times. How much further left can you turn? What do you want to know? My secrets. I don't have any secrets. My life is an open zip. What, my real first name? Gwendolyn. But you know, Zoe, didn't you do your homework? Didn't you find out everything there was to know about me before you got here? What year was I born? You're correct. 1915. The 28th of February, 1915. It was a wonderful year. I remember every minute of it. Wilson kept us out of war. The Lusitania sank. It cost 2 cents to send a letter from New York all the way to California. 2 cents. Didn't get there till 1921. And I was born on a beautiful farm way out in the middle of the country. Oh, yes, I was. It was a beautiful little radish farm near the intersection of Kings Highway and Pitkin Avenue. There's a lot of farms in Brooklyn back then. You see, the Jews that came from Eastern Europe, they loved to live, work the land. And there was a lot of land that wasn't all Prospect Park, covered with concrete. Both of my parents, they were from Austria, Vienna. My mother, she was so little. Her name was Sina Drux. But when she came to America, they called her Celia. My father had been married before her. His first wife died. left him with 4 children. But my mother, she loved them like they were her very own. Then she had 4 more. And my father, Zero Mostel, he was a sidewalk rabbi, meaning he wasn't really a rabbi. But people treated him like one because he was a wise man. He was a kind man. He was a learned man. He was a man who kept the family together the best way he knew how, by being a wine chemist. Then he ran a kosher slaughterhouse after we moved to Connecticut, to the bustling metropolis of Moodus, where there was 1 shepherd and 12 very nervous sheep. Hundreds of acres of rolling hills, thousands of trees. It was unnatural. We hated it. But we told Papa we loved it, Papa, because he loved it and we loved him. You know how most people save their money so they can move from the city to the country? With us, it was the other way around. We saved up our money so we could move back to a tenement. Because Mama, she wanted to expose us to art, to culture. There we were in 2 rooms. Mama, Papa, my 5 brothers, my 2 sisters, all of us clamoring for attention. But I wanted attention more than any of them. Mama, she was so happy. She was back in the city where there were theaters and concerts and museums. When I was a child, almost every day, my mother would dress me in a black velvet suit. She would take me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And there I would spend hours just copying the great masters. My mother would stand over my shoulder watching me. To any visitor who walked by, she would say, "This is mein son, the Künstler." Then when I was 9 years old, I painted a picture of my father. I showed it to my mother. She said, "Look, he's 9 years old and he paints like a man." Then when I was 20, I did an abstract. I showed it to my mother. She said, "Look, he's 20 years old and he paints like a child." You see, my mother always understood this need. No, it's a compulsion to paint. But never my father. My father always said it was against our religion to create a graven image, but it's not a graven image, Papa. This is art, and art is life. What? Of course you can quote me. It's an interview, it's not a confession. What was I talking about? I was talking about my father. Do you know that my father had the only wine license in New York City during Prohibition? He could have made a fortune if he used it for the bootleggers. But he only made sacramental wine. Money wasn't important to him. He always said we had enough. There was a time... 1 minute. Did you buy that jacket during a total eclipse? Palestinian Anti-Defamation League. This is Yasser speaking. Stop talking, this is a recording. How many times have I told you never to call me here? How did you get this number? What? I'm working, I'm at my studio, I'm painting. It's my refuge, what do you want? And you called me here for that? You interrupted my work for that? May I ask you a question? Are you asleep at night? My wife, she needs a pint of sour cream. She always calls me here. Remind me, have that number changed. You know, when Katie and I first got married, 33 years ago. God, 33 years. Well, she thought painting was a hobby. She thought this studio was just some place to pass the time. I think she thought I had a broad down here. She didn't realize painting was my life. Kate is short for Catherine Harkin. She came from the original dysfunctional family, which is why she fell in love with me. I was a dysfunctional family all by myself. What a pair. A dysfunctional Jewish painter from New York and a dysfunctional Catholic rockette from Philadelphia. God, when I first met Katie, she was so beautiful. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life, and I thought, being a Jew, I was going to scare her away, and I would never have a chance with a woman as beautiful as this again as long as I lived. So I lied to her. I told her my real name was Arimo Ferrugia. I told her my parents were from Tuscany. And I told her that my great uncle was Pope Leo the 13th. My poor mother overheard me talking to her on the phone one day, and she was very surprised to find out that her great uncle from Minsk had turned out to be the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Katie was wonderful right from the start. But then there was Kate's mother. Kate's mother was, there's a word I'm looking for, she was, oh yes, crazy. The only smart thing that Meshuggah woman ever did was she forced Katie to have dancing lessons when Katie was a little girl. Oh, and when Katie was a little girl, her mother fell down one day in a department store. So the store settled with her for $500 whenever the family needed money. The mother went out and she fell down. Then after Katie and I were first going out together, well, the mother invited me for dinner. It was her way of sizing me up. So Katie finally explained to her mother that I was Jewish and about kosher, and that you never mix meat and dairy. So that night her mother served us a beautiful dinner of roast loin of pork. Alfredo. Recipes speak louder than words. And Jewish dietary laws, they're very strict. Pork and shellfish may only be eaten in Chinese restaurants. I didn't eat anything that night. I told Kate's mother I had matzah poisoning. So, then after Katie and I were first married, well, her mother stopped by one day for a little visit. She stayed for 5 years. 5 years! In the 5 years that woman lived with us, she and I spoke 18 words to each other. 9 of them were fuck. The other 9 were you! Painting. If it hadn't been for my painting, she and I never would have met. Well, that's right, we met at Cafe Society, but don't you see? One thing leads to another. I studied painting at CCNY. From CCNY, I used to give lectures about art at the Union Halls. The lectures, they were filled with jokes. The jokes led me to benefits. The benefits led me to nightclubs. And the nightclubs led me back to the greatest nightclub of them all, Cafe Society, 2 Sheridan Square. And the greatest salary of them all, $400 a week. Back then, that was a fortune. And the first night I was there, December 28th, 1941, Barney Josephson. He was the owner of the club. Well, he walked me down the stairs. There was a girl singer on the stage, and there wasn't a sound in the room except for that voice. Usually there's a couple of loudmouth drunks, people talking. Hell, it's a nightclub. That night, that voice had mesmerized 300 people. I said to Barney, who is that? I had to follow her. He told me, and I thought, good God, how do you follow Billie Holiday? Especially when you're doing an imitation of a teapot. But then I was standing backstage with Ivan Black. Now, he was the press agent for the club. Well, the MC said, now welcome the greatest star on the comedy horizon, Zero Mostel. And I said, who the hell is that? So my name is Sam. Why did he say Sam Mostel? Who changed my name? Ivan Black said, I changed your name. I said, why? I don't need a new name. My name is Sam. Why Zero? He said, do you remember what you told me your grade school average was? He said, and besides, you started from nothing. I said, well, it's too late now, so out I went. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Say, did you hear about the Hasidic rabbi? He walked into a bar. He had a parrot on his shoulder. The bartender said, where did you get that? The parrot said, they're all over Brooklyn. I do my imitation of a teapot. I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is my handle. Here it... Fuck, I'm a sugar bowl! I did my imitation of a butterfly at rest. And then one night, Katie, she was right there. She was sitting right there with my old friend Phil Lowe. That's right, Phil Lowe from the Goldbergs. You did do your homework, didn't you? I don't talk about Phil. Too depressing. All I'm saying is he was there with Kate. Dear Kate, beautiful Kate, pain in the ass Kate, God, she was the perfect woman. She was interested in everything. She wanted to live, laugh, love. She wanted to marry me. The only problem was, I was already married to a Schberg. That's not a Yiddish term, that was her name, Clara Schberg. We were kids together. We grew up together. I carried her books to school. We were horny Jewish kids. Back then, horny Jewish kids got married. I chased after Clara till I caught her. And she didn't want me anymore. You know, Clara, she had the sense of humor of a grapefruit. Nothing I could do could make her laugh. Till I took my clothes off, then she laughed. Katie was different. Katie had the face of a rocket. Clara had the face of a rock. But you know, Katie and Clara had one thing in common. They both thought that they'd married a comedian who just painted for a hobby. They didn't realize I was a painter. I just did comedy to buy more paint. So, Katie and I were going out for about a year. Clara, we were separated for that year, but she still wouldn't give me a divorce. Finally, she agreed to a settlement. She would settle for $5,000 in cash plus 50% of my earnings over the next 2 years. So I gave her the $5,000 in cash. And I joined the army. Well, they sent me overseas. I was entertaining the troops in Europe. I was entertaining the troops in Europe. Oh, jeez. Oh. I developed an ulcer. Oh, so they sent me to the army doctor. Oh, I walked in for my appointment. I said, well, doctor. He said, you must stop masturbating. I said, why? He said, I'm trying to examine you. He said, no, you have a spastic colon. He said, no, you have a spastic brain. He said, I'm going to cure you of this right now. I said, well, how are you going to do that? He said, I'm going to give you a coffee enema. I said, you what? He said, I'm giving you a coffee enema. Bend over the table. I bent over the table. He applied it. I screamed. The doctor said, oh, too hot? I said, no, too sweet. I was discharged that afternoon. What do you mean that's not what you heard? Really, what did you hear? My politics. My politics had nothing to do with my discharge. Sure, I was a liberal. Hell, I was even a Marxist. I mean, anybody with a half a brain was back then. Why? Because of what was going on in Europe? Fascism? Hitler? Socialists? We weren't fighting America. We were fighting fascism. Nobody ever thought America would embrace a socialist way of life, but we all thought the government could help out a little bit. And so did Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the greatest Jewish minds in the history of the world. No, he was a poor man's mentality. In rich man's clothing, he gave us social security, not socialist security. And he gave us the greatest gift. He gave us the WPA, the Works Project Administration. And you tell me, did the beneficiaries of said administration create an overthrow of the government? No. They created timeless works of art. They gave us Clifford Odets and Elmer Rice, Harold Clune, John Houseman, Orson Welles. That we could have done without Houseman, what a pain in the ass he was. But the government gave us work when nobody else had the means to give us work. The government gave me a brush. And the government gave me paint and canvas. And they gave it to Rockwell Kent and to Jackson Pollock. Moses Sawyer, Diego Rivera, my God. You think about the incredible works of art that would have remained unpainted. Think about the great dramas, the plays that would have remained unwritten. You think about a world without Kurt Weill, without Bertolt Brecht, without Awake and Sing, Street Scene. That would have been a national tragedy. Just like your jacket. Jesus! Where was I? Oh, I know, I had just gotten out of the army. So, I came back. Katie and I went down to Long Branch, New Jersey, and we got married. How did my parents take the news of the marriage? Well, they knew I wasn't a religious Jew. So when they heard I had married Kate, they refused to meet her. They would not meet a Catholic girl. Then they declared me dead. Covered the mirrors, sat shiver for a week, threatened to commit suicide. Other than that, they took it very well. Only Kate's mother could have done the same. Still, Katie changed my life. She changed my life in the most fundamental way a man could imagine. She changed my career. Katie turned me into an actor. Me! Never would have thought that. I did characters. She said to me, you know, I think you'd be a very good actor with your characters. I said, I think you're crazy. I was doing a review on Broadway with Imogene Coco, I love her, and with Loose Lips. That's Jerry Robbins. Him I don't love. Well, anyway, Loose Lips says to me, you know, I think you'd be a very good actor. I think you should study. I said, study what? The reviews for the show were terrible, especially for me. One critic said, Zero lives up to his name. So, one night after the show, I was walking home, going up 34th Street where Kate was studying. By the way, we had the greatest apartment in New York City. It was on 46th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenue. It had these huge rooms, these high ceilings, and the elevator opened right into the living room. It was wonderful, and people would come over to... You know, the first time Kate's mother came to visit, she stepped off the elevator, she walked in, she thought we were living in a department store. She thought she'd walked into the furniture section. So she fell down and asked us for $500. We never kept the doors locked. We loved people to come over. You never knew who was going to step through those doors. Great writers, great actors, great painters, bad painters, FBI men. That's another story. Where was I? Oh, I know, I was going up 34th Street. Oh, I was going right past the place where Kate was studying her acting, so I thought, all right, well, I'll stop in, I'll watch, I'll make fun of her, and then I'll walk her home. She was good. She was very good. And the teacher, he wasn't teaching her how to act, but he was showing her techniques. He was showing her tricks to keep it fresh. And I thought, all right, I use the characters in my club act. Katie said I should, Robin said I should. I said to the teacher, give me a lesson. He said, have you ever studied the classics? Of course I've studied the classics. And where did you study the classics? Grossingers. He said, get up on the stage, do something. I said, you're the teacher, you do something. He said, improvise. Would you believe I didn't even know what the hell improvise meant? He said, make it up as you go along. I thought, well, I could do that. I could do that. Hello, Harry. Harry, it's Max. Now, why do you start yelling every time I call? I'm calling you about the money. Yeah. Well, I can't pay you back today. But listen, that's why I'm calling. I am going to pay you back, Harry. I'm going to pay you back everything I owe you. And how about this? How about double your money back? Oh, I taught you about that. Oh, I knew you would. But listen, I need a little time. Give me 4 weeks. 4 weeks, that's all I ask, Harry. And you get double your money back. What's my plan? My plan is none of your business. That's because it's my business. This business has been keeping me down for the last 30 years. This business of mortgage payments, insurance premiums, 18-hour days of dealing with the public I hate. It's only my money. It's my money. It's my money, and it's going to come back to me now. Because it's mine. After all the years of putting it in, it's coming back out tonight. That's it. Beautiful. Burn Burn, baby, burn! Look at the beautiful flames. The flames turn into smoke. The smoke turns into money. And the money comes falling on back down to earth. And the money's mine, the money's mine. And you know where the money's going? It's for you, Stella. Stella, the love of my life. You're going to get your house on Fifth Avenue. You'll get your mink coat, your pearls. Whatever you want is yours. Finally, I can give it to you and to Saul. Saul, our only son. This money is for you, my baby. You're going to be a man among men. You're going to go to Harvard. You'll go to Yale. And everyone will look up to you. And look up to that. Burn, baby. Burn, baby. Burn. What? Stella, stay back. Stella, what are you hysterical for? It's only a building. Of course I called the fire department. We're insured. It's... What do you mean we're Saul? What do you mean? He's home with you. What do you mean you put him in the back room for a nap? He's in there. He's burning. My baby is burning. Oh, God, no. No. Then I said to the teacher, would you like to see it again funny? And I found I could do it again. And I did it funny. I ran into the building, I saved the kid. We all lived happily ever after. But that day, an actor, me, an actor was born. I got some work. I got a few shows. And one night, we're sitting at home, and the phone rings. Hello? Zero Mostel. Yes? This is Louis B. Mayer. I thought it was my friend Sam Jackie. I hung up. The phone rang again. Mr. Mostel. Yes? This really is Louis B. Mayer. And it was. He signed me to a 7-year contract. He brought me out to Hollywood for Duke Barry Was a Lady with Lucille Ball. Beautiful, funny. Well, he brings me out to be an actor. I get out there. What does he have me do in the picture? He has me do my nightclub act. So, after the first day of shooting, the phone rings again. Mostel, yes? This is Mr. Mayer. What? Yes, Mr. Mayer, how are you? I'm having a party Saturday night at my house. Every A-list star will be there, every major head of every major studio. And I want you there too. Well, thank you, Mr. You're going to be the entertainment. You see, I own you now. And for the next 7 years, you are my boy. I want your best material, Saturday night, 7:30, use the back door, and don't be late. I wasn't late. I didn't go. Instead, I went down to Long Beach and I did a benefit for the Longshoremen's Union. Eleanor Roosevelt was there. I gave her her first Blinson. And with those teeth, but that was a Saturday. On Monday, I was heading back to New York. Most of me was left on the cutting room floor, but I didn't care. I was going home to my Katie. I was going home to our beautiful apartment, to our beautiful friends. We were living in the lap of luxury. But you never know when luxury is going to stand up. Remember I told you how the elevator doors opened? We never locked them. We loved so much when people came over. Do you know some of the greatest minds of the 20th century got into the most stimulating debates right in our living room? People would fly all over the country to hear these people speak, pay money. And we didn't even have to put our shoes on. So one night, Katie and I are sitting there after dinner, and we're enjoying a cup of coffee. and the elevator doors opened. And two men got out, two strangers. Well, we greeted them warmly, and they just stared at us. We asked them if they had the right apartment. They just kept staring. Well, we weren't afraid of them. They were too dull to be threatening. No, and we knew they weren't in the theater. They were wearing ties. I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable, so I put a few ties on over my pajamas. Finally, I said, "Gentlemen, how can we help you?" One of them had the gall to say, "Well, we hear you know everything that goes on in this neighborhood. We're looking for a vacant apartment." Yeah. "Oh, and if you don't know about a vacant apartment, tell us, where is there a Communist Party meeting?" I said, "I don't know. I'm not a communist." Well, they kept staring around the room, just pretending they weren't G-men. Finally, I said to them, "Gentlemen, can I get you a piece of fruit? Perhaps a glass of tea?" One of them said, "Well, that's very generous of you." I said, "Oh, well, as Trotsky used to say, share and share alike." And then what seemed like another 14 hours of silence, I finally herded them back in the elevator. And just as the doors were closing, I said, "Thank you so much for coming, gentlemen. And J. Edgar Hoover wears a dress." 2 years ago, I found out I was right. But after those men left, the elevator doors, they didn't open as much. I would leave the apartment, people I thought were my friends. They'd cross the street so they wouldn't have to say hello. The checks stopped coming, the phone stopped ringing, and the government that once gave me paint now gave me paranoia. You wanted to know a secret? I'll tell you. I am the stupidest man that ever lived. One night I'm having drinks with an actor friend of mine. He said, "Z, I'm not working. I don't know why." I said, "Well, I'm not working either." He said, "Well, you're blacklisted." Blacklisted. Blacklisted. You heard about that, didn't you? Because I never read about it in the New York Times. Now that we have to talk about. We have to talk about what happened to people like me, to Anne Revere, to Burgess Meredith, to Jack Buford, and then the other side, the ones that named names. Like Elliot Kazan, he gave them names. And Lee J. Cobb, he gave them names. Oh, and Jerome Rabinowitz, Jerry Robbins, he gave them names. You know, they called Robbins to testify. In 1953, he had to go home twice to change his underwear. He was so terrified. But once he got there, he kissed the feet of the committee. He said he had been at a Communist Party meeting in 1947 with Lionel Berman and Jerry Chodorow, Madeline Lee, dear little Madeline Lee. She was married to Jack Buford. She was a little radio actress. She made baby noises for a living. Madeline the Red Menace. Robbins gave them the names of my friends. And the thing about Robbins was he was never committed to communism or social action. He had never read Marx or Lenin. He couldn't understand dialectical materialism, much less have a conversation about it. He was a self-centered son of a bitch! Brilliant! Brilliant, but so self-centered. You know, he got out of the army in 1943 by telling the world he was a homosexual. And in 1953, he gave names to the committee so that the world would not find out he was a homosexual. I guess morality is a matter of timing. And Robbins he's joined the Communist Party only to make connections, to further his career. He would have joined the Girl Scouts if they let him choreograph an opera. He was so weak. So weak. And they go after the weak ones. And he gave them our names. Because he thought we could survive. Oh no. That time in America, it cannot be forgotten, Mr. New York Times, because it was the most insidious, the subtlest of all exterminations. They said, well, we're going after the communists, but communist equaled liberal, and liberal equaled Jew. And if you were a Jewish writer or a director, you had influence. Your thoughts were getting out to the general public. They were not going after the kosher butchers, the little tailors. Their thoughts never reached past their front counters. They wanted the artists. And that committee of lily white Protestants, they marched us in front of that firing squad of fear, and they pulled the trigger on our lives, on our work. It was an intellectual final solution to eliminate thought. They couldn't kill our bodies anymore. No, they've done a damn fine job of that already. So now they tried to obliterate our minds. And they targeted Jewish minds. Yes, they did. You look at my dear friend Lucille Ball. I loved her. No, I adored her. She and I used to drink each other under the table at MGM. She had thoughts. She had opinions. She knew what was going on. They found her communist registration card from the 1936 election. She signed it. They had her signature on the Communist Party card. And they brought her in front of the committee and they said, well, Miss Ball, what is the meaning of this? And she said, well, I only did that to please my grandfather. And they said, well, of course you did. Oh, then there's no problem. Oh, go back to work. Live and be well. Live and prosper. She could have called her show I Love Lenin and they would have forgiven her. And they did forgive her. Her ordeal, it began on Monday, it was over on Friday. But not for a Berman. Not for a Chodorov. And certainly not for my friend Philip Lowe. Well, you wanted to hear about Phil Lowe, didn't you? All right. You got it. Phil Lowe was the dearest, kindest, funniest, smartest. He was just the most wonderful human being I'd ever met in my life. Everybody loved Molly's husband, Jake, from the Goldbergs. You could see this man's goodness. You could see his goodness through a 12-inch television screen. Do you know Phil actually believed in the greatest principle of America, that all people are created equal, even actors? Despicable. Do you know what his un-American activities were? Oh, he fought for black actors to be able to use the same stage door as white actors. He fought for equal pay for men and women, for paid rehearsal time, for hot running water in the dressing room. Outrageous! And so, the committee subpoenaed him. They blacklisted him and they destroyed him. And then all of America sat back and said, well, of course he shouldn't work. He's evil. He is the Jewish devil. And that man lost everything. And Katie and I, we took him in. And we clothed him, we fed him, and we watched him disintegrate. And one morning, Katie gave him his breakfast. Phil put on his coat. He checked into the Taft Hotel, and he jumped out the window. You want to talk about your stars on the sidewalk? Well, how about when they're broke? And they're broken, and they're covered with blood, and the only place they have left to turn is an 18-story window. The House Un-American Activities Committee. What a joke. That was no committee. It was an inquisition. That was no investigation. It was a massacre, and they killed him. They killed him. They killed him. They murdered my friend. And do you know who was next on their list? Mr. New York Times? Me. They're coming after me. They're coming after me. They're coming after me. Is that the secret? Is that what you wanted to hear? Well, good, you got what you wanted. This interview is over. She said, Philly, come on over for dinner. No, don't change. Come right now before the food gets cold. So a few minutes later, the elevator door opened. Phil walked in. I took his coat. He was standing there, stark naked. We sat down for dinner and nobody said a word. Just as he was leaving, I said, Philly, your fly's open. A few days later, he moved in. And I still miss him. You heard he died of an overdose? What difference does it make, Mr. New York Times? Pills, windows. He died of a sickness called the blacklist. And you want to hear something funny? Well, 3 days after Phil killed himself, the committee cleared his name. Wasn't that nice? His death made it to the headlines. His innocence never even made it to page 10. You can tell me a name now. We're having a relationship. Arthur. Arthur, you're so young. Arthur, you're a baby. Arthur, I have frozen food older than you. It's hard for you to imagine the climate of fear that we all lived in back then. Did you ever hear of a writer called Ring Lardner Jr.? He was a wonderful writer. He won the Oscar for the screenplay of Woman of the Year. He was one of the Hollywood 10. In fact, he was number 4. Well, he was also my very, very dear friend. Well, he was invited to appear in front of the House committee. And the committee chairman, Representative Thomas, said to Ring, "Could you name names?" And Ring said, "Yes, sir, I could name names." but I would hate myself in the morning. So, Chairman Thomas thanked Ring for his testimony. He cited him for contempt of Congress, and he sent him to a federal prison for a year. 3 months into his sentence, guess who Ring's cellmate was? Representative Thomas! They sent him up on a payroll fraud charge. A real crime, not a made-up one. And a year later, when Ring was getting out of jail, he realized his sentence, it was just beginning. Come on, strike that elegant pose again, Arthur. We have work to do. Who named me to the committee? Martin Berkeley. Martin Berkeley. He named me and 162 other people. He was the Babe Ruth of stool pigeons. And you want to hear something strange? If you were to put a gun to my head, I could not tell you who Martin Berkeley was. Still, a lovely invitation to a lovely party arrived. One day I am coming out of my apartment. I came out, there was a man standing across the street. He saw me, his face just lit up. He said, oh, you're Zero Mostel. I said, yes. He said, could I have your autograph? I said, well, certainly. I took the pen, the paper, I signed it, I started to hand it back to him. He said, better you should keep it. Could I please appear in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee on August 16, 1955? Of course. They said, please. That was an invitation I couldn't refuse. Well, my lawyer kept trying to get a postponement, just hoping this whole thing would go away! But it didn't. So at least they promised me they would not ask me to name names. That was a relief. So 6 weeks after Phil killed himself, October 15th, 1955, I walked into the committee hearing room. There were glaring, stark, white lights everywhere, and there were television cameras. They were everywhere, and I thought, well, how wonderful. It's the first time I've been on television in years. Good morning, gentlemen.
State your name, please.
My name? I thought you would have known that already.
For the record.
For the record. For the record, my name is Samuel Joel Mostel, M-O-S-T-E-L.
Isn't Zero your given name?
No, sir. Zero's a nickname. It represents the amount of money I've been making over the last few years. Since your investigation began.
Is that meant to be funny?
Yes, it is. You see, I make my living as a comedian. That was humor.
This is no place for jokes.
And you're right. And I am sorry. And I apologize. I will answer each question seriously and completely. Go ahead. What do you want to know?
Are you a communist?
Well, you certainly don't beat around the bush belt, do you? No. I'm not a communist.
Are you in favor of the violent overthrow of the government?
As our fourth president, James Madison, for whom they named a lovely hotel on Collins Avenue in Miami Beach. I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of people by silent and gradual encroachments by those in power, rather than by violent and sudden usurpations. I don't believe he was a Democrat, sir. I think he was a member of your party, the Whigs.
Mr. Martin Berkeley has testified you attended a meeting of the Communist Party in Hollywood in 1938.
Absolutely not.
You're sure?
I'm positive. I did not get to Hollywood until 1942. I ate my last orange in 1943. I was under contract to 20th Century Fox. Or was it 18th Century Fox?
Who else was at the meeting?
Now, if I was not at the meeting, how could I tell you who else was at the meeting? Why don't you ask Mr. Berkeley?
Mr. Mostel, hostile witness.
I am not being a hostile witness, I swear to you. I did not get to Hollywood until 1942. Did you ever see Du Barry Was a Lady?
I did.
Did? You're the one. We did not start shooting that picture until the spring of 1942. Now, could you tell me, where did I meet this man, Mr. Berkeley?
At Lionel Stander's house.
Oh, at Lionel Standard. Well, now it makes perfect sense. I have never been to Lionel Stander's house, and I assure you, I know nobody named Berkeley. Unless they changed their name from Berkowitz.
Have you heard of an organization called American Youth for Democracy?
Yes. Yes, in fact, I did a benefit for that organization in 1946. The year my first son Joshua was born. Hiya, Joshy, Daddy's on television!
Did you know it was a communist front organization?
How could I? Your committee did not name it a communist front organization until 1951, 5 years later.
Were you ever a member of the Communist Party?
It's funny, I thought you would ask me that. Based on the advice of my counsel, I refuse to answer that question. Based on constitutional liberties, which I understand, are granted to every citizen in this country, and which I'm sure your committee does not disagree, do you? I will say yes. I did a benefit for American Youth for Democracy, but I've done benefits for many organizations.
Did you know a man named Ivan Black?
Well, of course, I knew Ivan Black. He was my press agent. He gave me my nickname.
Was he a communist?
I refuse to speak about any other individual. I will only speak about myself.
Mr. Mostel, how do you feel about using your talents to raise money for communists?
Well, no. Since when did you stop beating your wife? You know, if I was at a benefit, and I have done benefits for cancer, for heart disease, for the common cold, for a host of other favorites, if I was at a benefit, I was there as an entertainer. I was there as a comedian. I was there to do my imitation of a butterfly at rest.
Is your imitation of a butterfly at rest funny?
On that, I'll take the fifth. The next morning, the headline said, Mostel takes the fifth. It was all so stupid. So stupid. Why were they going after actors? Why were they targeting actors? What did they think we were doing? Giving acting secrets to the enemy? 10 years in limbo. 10 years of working in toilets. 10 years of being paid half of what I'd been promised. 10 years of my cane working a finger to the bone to keep the family together because the government forbid me to make people laugh. But they couldn't take a brush out of my hand. No. The government can stop a man from selling his creations, but they cannot stop creation itself. Only death can do that. We all know death is nature's way of telling you, slow down. sour cream. Sour cream is sour cream. It's cream, it's sour. I will go to Christina's and you will like it. So, I came back to this studio and I painted. For 2 years, I just painted and I painted and I painted. And then I got an offer, as good as gold. And there was a new play called As Good as Gold. And it was going to Broadway, except it only got to New Haven. My friend Ringard, he summed up this play beautifully. He said, "This is the worst fucking play I ever saw." The critics weren't as kind. The play closed at intermission. The producers abandoned us. They just left us there in New Haven. They took the money and they skipped town and they just left us there. I said to Katie, my God, we're going to spend the rest of our lives in New Haven. She said, look, the Jews made it out of Egypt. We'll get out of New Haven. But doing that play, Arthur, it woke something up in me. It made me want to be an actor. It made me want to perform. Made me want to say, you did not knock me down. You did knock us down. So a bunch of us who had been blacklisted, we got together. We gave ourselves the second chance. Burgess Meredith. God damn it, how I adore you, Burgess Meredith. I love little Buzz Meredith. He found this little tenement on the Lower East Side, and he turned it into a theater. You put in 2 more lights, you would have blown every circuit to China. And he cast me as Leopold Bloom, James Joyce's Ulysses in Nighttown, James Joyce. God. The language, James Joyce. You know, when I was a kid, I used to lay under the covers reading Ulysses because I heard it was dirty. But Joyce cannot be read. Joyce has to be spoken out loud, and sometimes during rehearsal, I would get so caught up in the language, the poetry of James Joyce, that I would start screaming out the lines at the top of my lungs. And that little tenement would just shake to its very foundation. And little Buzz Meredith, he'd say, "Oh, hold on to your tits, everybody, it's 0 hour." The world came to see us. The world made its way down to that little tenement. We could feel it. We could feel the change. We could feel the cosmic consciousness of anger that had built up in this country over the years. Since Joe Welch said to Joe McCarthy, "You no shame, you no decency." I changed my mind about your jacket. It's not so bad after all. But now the lights change. So comes the expression, "I see you in a different light." You see me in a different light too. Who asked you? I told you. It's my interview. I will ask the questions. The next question is, guess who called me? I'll tell you, you'll never guess. David Merrick, the greatest producer and the meanest son of a bitch in the history of the American theater. He was doing a new play for Broadway called The Good Soup. But he wanted me to star. I said, "Merrick, I want $1,000 a week." He said, "Yes." I said, "I want my name over the title." He said, "Yes." I said, "I want a car to take me back and forth to the theater." He said, "Yes." I said, "I want the title of the play changed." He said, "No." I said, "You've got a deal." Everything was back on track. I was back on Broadway. The curse had been broken. I didn't even care. That one afternoon after rehearsal, my car didn't come and pick me up. That's all right. I could afford a cab. No. I could afford anything. Taxi! 86th and Central Park West. I was getting out of the cab in front of my apartment. There had been a snowstorm that day and the streets were ice and sleet. It was terrible, but, well, I was just closing the door of the cab after giving the driver a very generous tip. And I looked up, and there was the M86 crosstown bus careening at me at 50 miles an hour. The driver had lost control on the ice, and the bus was coming at me sideways. And I looked up, I could see the faces of the people sitting in the window, helpless, horrified. They knew what I knew, what was about to happen. So I tried to do a glissade assemblée over the hood of the car. But only my right leg made it. My left leg. It got left behind. And the bus connected, it crashed, and it crushed me. January 13th, 1960. You don't forget a day like that. A day when 25 tons of steel uses your left leg as a parking lot. But you know what's so funny? I didn't feel it. As much as I heard it, the popping and the crackling of the bones splintering inside my leg, the tearing of the flesh, the stripping of the muscles, the leg snapping like a peppermint stick crumbling in the hands of an anxious child. I heard the symphony of screams coming from the strangers as they gathered around, watching the blood running down my left leg, warming my left foot. I heard the cacophony of the sirens rushing to this gruesome scene to save me, and then spinning red lights, and then a stark white light, and then the silhouette of a dozen faces looking down, and then came the ear-splitting whisper from the doctor's lips. We're going to have to amputate. There is nothing else we can do. Oh. And then there was another voice. Oh, it was mine. Doctor, I've had this leg since I was a boy chief. I've grown very fond of it, and I'd really like to keep it. And then fade black. And when I woke up, I thought I'd been dreaming. This grotesque dream. But the stark white light of the hospital room and the buzz of the albino nurses hovering over my head like wingless angels made me realize this had been no dream. So I looked down from my left leg, and it was there. It looked like raw liver, but it was there, and it was going to stay there. Then after the 6th operation, everyone was amazed that the doctor had been able to save my leg. He asked me if I would appear in front of a forum of 100 doctors from the New York area so he could explain to them the procedure, show them what he'd done, show off a little bit, I think. But I said, of course. You saved my leg. I'll do anything you ask me to do, of course. So a few days later, they wheeled me into this surgical amphitheater to total silence. I sat on a gurney in the front of the room. The doctor said, please, show us your leg. I raised my right pant leg. not a scar. The place went crazy. Yelling, screaming, and jumping on chairs. You never heard an ovation like this in your life. And then I said, oops. And I showed them my left leg. It took 15 operations, 6 months in the hospital. But he saved my leg. Once in a while, on a good day, I could even feel it. Not often. I have to walk with the cane, but it's all right. I don't use it on stage, and I don't use it when I paint. And the bus driver came to see me, and he brought me ice cream. And he and I became friends. We became the dearest of friends. But you want to know what the great miracle of that horrible, life-changing accident was? It got me out of the good suit. What a piece of shit that was. How lucky I was to have been hit by the bus. No, because the great Broadway producer, Leo Kurz, he came to see me in the hospital. He said, Z. My friends, they call me Z. Unless they're from England, they call me Zed. He said, Z, I'm doing a Broadway production of Eugene Ionesco's Rhinoceros. I said, He said, I want you to star. I said, Was it difficult becoming a rhinoceros every night? Arthur. One critic wrote that he was absolutely amazed at the beginning of the play that I was so realistic as a human being. You know, I went into Sardi's one night after the show, and I heard 2 actors talking. I heard my name, so I backed up to see what they were saying. One actor said to the other, oh, you've got to see Mostel in this play. Without any makeup, he turns himself into a bellowing, roaring, wild animal. The other actor said, I've never seen him in a play where he didn't. And you know, Rhinoceros, it's not about absurdity. It's about conformity. It's about being true to yourself. You see, a rhinoceros doesn't think. A rhinoceros just knocks down whatever is in its path to get what it wants. It's about not naming names. It's about not becoming a Jerry Robbins or a Marty Berkeley. It's about being true to your art. You see, I'm an impressionistic painter, right? Wrong. I am a Mostelitic painter. Because I paint like myself. I do not paint like Paul Cézanne. Paul Cézanne, great painter. He's known all over the world except Montana. Cézanne will paint a picture of a mountain. And we look and we say, oh, isn't it wonderful? Oh, so wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What does it mean? It means nothing. It's a description. A painting is about the emotion it brings up in you when you look at it. How does a painting make you feel? You look at Rembrandt's Descent from the Cross. How could you not be sad? You look at Modigliani. How could you not giggle? You look at Picasso's great masterpiece, Guernica. How could you not be angry at the foolishness of war? No, a painting, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. It's the mystery of creation. And it's wrapped up in a painting. Why do we feel we need to know everything about everything about everything? Can't some questions remain unanswered? Can't some things remain a mystery? What's your next question? No, I was not the first choice for a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I was the third choice. I was the third choice for everything I've ever done in my life, but everybody else was working. You see, the great Roman playwright, Titus Maccius Plautus, he wrote it for Milton Berle. They were very close friends. Well, Berle, he wanted too many changes. So then they offered it to Phil Silvers. Phil Silvers said, no, this is Sergeant Bilko in a toga. So then choice number 3, they offered it to me. You see, I had worked with George Abbott back when the earth was cooling. He sent me the script for Forum, and I have never hated anything so much in my life. It was god-awful. And besides, I had been invited to go to the Moscow Art Theater to do King Lear in Russian. And I thought between Lear in Russian and Forum in English, Lear was gonna have more laughs. But it was not meant to be. Harold Prince, the great producer, the great genius, he offered me $4,000 a week. How do you turn down $4,000 a week? Especially when you've been making $4,000 a year. But it was Katie. It was my darling Katie, my beloved Katie. She convinced me to do Forum. She said, my angel, if you don't do this show, I'm going to stab you in the ball. Now, how do you argue with logic like that? And Prince, the great genius, then he hired the other geniuses. He hired Larry Gelbart to do the book, Stephen Sondheim to do the music, George Abbott to direct, even though Abbott was 175 years old at the time. Then he hired the greatest cast that ever was, David Burns. Davy Burns, my God, Davy was the funniest man on Broadway. My old friend Jack Guilford, he hired 10 of the most beautiful women you ever saw in your life. We opened in Philadelphia. Look, it said it right on the marquee. The funniest musical in the history of Broadway. And the audience sat there like they were watching Death of a Salesman. 2.5 hours without one laugh. There wasn't a titter. So the boys went back to work. Larry Gelbart started rewriting the book. We'd get rewrites in the morning, rehearsal in the afternoon, a new show at night. Rehearsal, new show, rehearsal, new book, new 18 hours a day of torment, of torture! Larry Gelbart came into my dressing room one night after the show and he said, you know, if they ever find Adolf Hitler alive, I hope he's out of town with a new musical. So, we get to Washington, and there is still no change. They're sitting there hating it. After a Wednesday matinee, I'm sitting in my dressing room. Knock on the door. Come in. The door opened. I could see them in the mirror behind me. It was Hal Prince and George Abbott. I saw them. I knew something was up. You know what they say, where there's smoke, there's salmon. I thought they were going to fire me. I was hoping they would fire me. Well, no, I had a run-of-the-play contract, so if they fired me, they had to pay me. And then I could go off to Moscow to do my King Lear. Oh, but the news was worse than that. Hal said, we believe in this show. Yes, We believe it can be fixed. Yes? He said, we have just the guy who can fix it. Yes? He said, we want to bring in Jerry Robbins. A morbid silence fell over that dressing room. It fell over my heart. Hal said, well? I said, are you asking me to shake his hand? He said, no. I said, are you asking me to eat with him? He said, no. He said, I am asking you to work with him. I said, of course I'll work with him. You see, we of the left do not blacklist. So, the next morning, George Abbott called a rehearsal on the stage. I walked out. There sat the three of them. Harold Prince, George Abbott, Jerry Robbins. See no evil, speak no evil, and evil. George said, Jerry's going to show you how to do this number, and he walked right out the door. Well, the cast was here in a semicircle. I was about the end. Robbins was standing down there facing us. He stepped forward. He said, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the company. I'm Jerry Robbins. Well, of course, the cast gave our savior a wonderful, welcoming round of applause, and I thought, well, I should welcome him too. Hiya, loose lips. How you doing? You know, I haven't seen you since 1953. It was the year you named all those names to the committee. You haven't aged very well, Mr. Robbins. Sleeping poorly from a bad conscience. Did you say hello to Jack Gilbert over there? Say hello to Jack. You remember Jack, whose wife's career you destroyed. Don't apologize. What are you apologizing for, Mr. Robbins? Don't you know? Your testimony saved America. Well, when you die, they're going to give you a hero's funeral? No, a state funeral. Oh, but you know, you're not going to be able to be buried in hallowed ground. Because the Torah says that informers cannot be buried in hallowed ground. Your soul is going to twist and turn in the limbo of your own dishonor, and your soul will roam the earth forever, like a golem, like a feared and hated golem! Shall we do the opening number? Tragedy tomorrow, comedy tonight. And he fixed it. That little weasel, he fixed it. He put in that new opening number and got everything worked after that. And we found we could work together because we put creation above our own common differences. You know, our blood was on the floor, but Forum was a smash. No, I hate when I hear that. I hate when I hear Mostel doesn't stick to the script. I've never changed a word the author wrote. I've never moved a comma. I might add something once in a while. I mean, you tell me what was so terrible one night during Forum that I announced the result of the Sonny Liston Floyd Patterson. I gave it a Roman context. I said he knocked him out in round XII. Now, one night we are doing Forum in St. Louis, in the great 12,000-seat outdoor amphitheater on the 4th of July, in the park where there are fireworks! Fireworks! apologize to the audience for having a Mexican dinner before the I know it wasn't in the script, but there were explosions. And you tell me this. I was so terrible in form. Then why? Why was I Harold Prince's third choice to be tethered? No, it's true. First, they wanted Danny Kaye. Then they wanted Danny Thomas. Then Dan Daly, Chief Dan, as long as your name was Dan. Well, that script, it had been kicking around for years. It was just called Tethered, and it was about the one man and his family. So I read it, and I said, no. You can tell a story through one man, but it needed a bigger picture. It needed a larger world view. Where was the community? Where was the circle of our little village? And they, the producers, they wanted to make Fiddler, so un-Jewish. They said, no beards. None of the men wear beards. Oh, and let's have pastel towels. And no tzitzis. No, put the fringe under the costume. We don't want to see that. And I said, no. I said, the audience has to see these things. They have to know who we are. They have to love who we are so that they can hate what's being done to us. I never thought Fiddler was the greatest script ever. I really did not, but I thought the theme was important. It was universal. It was tradition. And years later, when Fiddler opened in Tokyo, the producers were very nervous as to how the show would be received. And one critic wrote, "Do the people in America understand this show? It is so Japanese." And I will say this for Jerry Robbins. The little weasel was a genius. Oh, he's a genius! Because he took us, the actors, and he used us as a brush. And he took the writers, he used them as a palette. And he created this magnificent masterpiece. And on the opening night of Fiddler on the Roof, Jerry Robbins saved my life. He saved my theatrical life. September 22nd, 1964, the opening night of Fiddler, I got out of my car in front of the stage door of the Imperial Theater on 46th Street. I looked up. There was the marquee. Name of the play. My name even bigger, above the title. And I started to go through that stage door. No! I collapsed into the curb, crying, hysterical, with one song from that show going over in my head, over and over. Little bird, little traveler, I don't understand what's happening today. Everything is all a blur. And it was a blur. For me, here I had to go onto that stage to portray a man who disowns his own child, just as my parents had disowned me. My mother was on her deathbed, and I brought Josh to meet his grandmother for the first time. She saw us and she pulled herself up in the bed. And she reached out her hand. And she said, "No! No! No!" And she died. Tevye has no choice. Tevye has no choice. He says, if I bend that far, I will break. And yet I wanted my parents to have bent that far. And they couldn't. And the collision of life and art smashed into me outside of that stage door. And once again left me crushed in a curve. And Robbins, all 5 feet 4 of me, running out of the stage door. He pulled me through and pushed me into my dressing room, put me in my chair, took me by my face, and said, "If not you, who? If not now, when? And for some reason, don't ask why." 25 years of guilt just lifted off of my shoulders. And I knew I could go out on that stage and be Tevye. But Robbins never knew when to shut up. What can I say to you? Tell me the words that will get you on that stage tonight. I said, promise me. Promise me now that I will play Tevye in the movie of Fiddler. But no, that was not meant to be. And that was like another death in the family. You know, if they had given Robbins the movie to direct, I know he would have hired me. I know that. But instead, they gave it to Norman Jewison to direct because Jewison was a devout and ultra-conservative Presbyterian. And then as Tevye, he goes and he hires Topo Gigio, whatever. What did I think of the movie of Fiddler? I thought it was the greatest Western ever made. Shut. Don't even mention the producers. I hated the producers. I was in pain the entire time we made that film. I look at it, I look like a beached whale in that movie. And you know what the great tragedy of my life is, Arthur? With 25 Broadway shows, 50 motion pictures, 10,000 paintings I will leave behind. Do you know what's my legacy? Do you know how I will be remembered? Mostel. Oh, yes! He's the fat guy in the producer. I sound angry? I am. I'm a very angry man. You see, anyone who's been excluded is angry. And I have been excluded as a man. I have been excluded as an entertainer. I've been excluded as a Jew. I've had so many doors slammed in my face yet. I stand on the other side of those doors. I pound, I scratch, I scream, I say, "Let me in. Mostel is here, son of Israel, son of Cena. How can you exclude the life of the party?" And then the door opens. I don't really want to go in. After Fiddler opened, we heard from the politicians again. No, it wasn't a subpoena. This time it was an invitation to Mr. and Mrs. Zero Mostel, President and Mrs. Lyndon Baines Johnson, request the honor of your presence at a state dinner at the White House on August 16th, 1965, honoring the Prime Minister of Israel, the Honorable Levi Eshkol. From the blacklist to the White House. In 10 years, I showed Katie that invitation and she cried. She sat in that chair, heaving sobs, the tears just streaming down her face. The thought of having to eat with Texans was too much. We got to the White House. We started through the front door. And I could feel my parents. I could feel them. Right there with me. Mama, Papa, look, it's me. Me, it's little Sammy, look. I'm at the White House. I am going to have dinner with the President of the United States. And I could hear my parents' voices, and they said, Sammy, we're so very proud of you. We sat down at our table. There was an empty chair next to mine. Katie said, oh, that's for Elijah. But I knew who was sitting there. I could feel him sitting there as he deserved to be sitting right there next to me. That's right, Arthur. And he was stark naked. And I was angry that Phil Loeb wasn't there, but I'm an angry man. You see, any man of contradictions is an angry man, and that's me. I'm heavy in repose. Yet I am light on my feet. I have a voracious appetite, yet I can't help biting the hand that feeds me. I am a spoiled child, Arthur of the Times, screaming for attention. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, and yet I'm a scared child. And I'm afraid to come into the light. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. And I am angry that I have to leave this place tomorrow, the only place I love, where the only friends I have, my paint, my brushes, my canvases, and I'll be gone for a long time because I have to start rehearsals for the new play, for The Merchant, which is going to be a big hit. Why? Because my name is on it. And once again, I will hear the prison bars of the theater clang shut as they lock me up 8 times a week. You know what else I'm angry about? That our time together is done. What? You got your interview. I finished the painting. And besides, I gotta go to Zabar's for sour cream. But now it's your turn, Arthur. It's your turn to paint me. Put me into the light. Give back what I gave to you. Some will be pretty, some will be ugly. But it will all be Mostel. You know, I thought I'd hate every minute of this, but I haven't. I have loved spending every moment with you, and I'm glad you asked me to do it. I was your third choice. Hey, I just noticed your ears. You know, your ears look bigger when you're standing up than when you're sitting down.